Hi gang, Rob here. This is 25 January 2013. It's been a pretty interesting week for us Americans. As I've watched things unfold on a national scale, I've reflected back on the last 2.5 months, looked at what's happened in our nation, because it seems to me that we have some pretty dark forces gathering, and we have them gathering and acting at a quick and accelerating pace. Let me kind of take you through a timetable of what's happened since the beginning of November. Early in November, the first Tuesday, President Barack Hussein Obama was reelected. He accepted his victory with boldness and realizing that he doesn't have any more elections to win. He started to put in place his second-term agenda with great vigor. The Benghazi situation conveniently pushed back, swept under the rug, minimized, to be handled later by a less than enthusiastic Congress. In mid-December, we had a mass shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. A mass shooting which is not unlike several others we've had in the last few years. It occurred by the perpetrator was a mentally unstable individual who was in possession of guns that were not legally his to possess, and he wreaked havoc and took lives with great terror in a gun-free zone. By the playbook written by Saul Alinsky and carried on by Rahm Emanuel, the democratic, liberal, progressive forces in this country mobilized quickly. Within the next month, legislation was dusted off by Dianne Feinstein. A new and improved version of her 1994 gun ban that systematically and incrementally removes from free people the right to keep and bear arms. During the same time that she's working this angle in the legislative branch of our government, Vice President Joe Biden hastily throws together a gun violence commission of sorts. He spends a whopping 3 days calling to Washington interested parties, groups, organizations who theoretically are there to give input to help solve this problem, and miraculously a week later he gives to the President a set of recommendations that the President most probably wrote before Biden ever met with one person. We've all seen the reaction of the National Rifle Association to how their input was received. And in those recommendations Vice President Biden supplied to the President were many which amounted to the use of executive order by the fiat of the President, without input from the legislature or the people, to tighten the noose on existing laws and regulations, to write new rules where he determines they need to be. So even if Feinstein and her cronies are unable to pass any meaningful gun control legislation, the executive branch will just handle this themselves. That happened in early January, early to mid-January. Then early this week, a study that was published by West Point, of all institutions, comes to light. The study was published in November. Didn't really see the light of day until it hit the internet this week. There is an organization, a think tank within West Point, I believe called the Center for Domestic Terrorism. And this is a 147-page study which identifies the cultures, mindsets, and propensities of groups that the government considers to be domestic terrorism threats. It purports to analyze the thinking and the motivations of such groups as the Ku Klux Klan, the skinheads, other groups that are less well known like Christians, militias, and anti-abortion activists. It has pie charts and bar graphs and assumptions and a chart at the end that ranks these groups of people, or these perceived groups of people, by how many acts of domestic terrorism that they've launched over the last 20 years or so, the frequency with which they commit these crimes, and their efficiency, how well they kill. Just so you know, if you are a Christian, an NRA member, and you think abortion is a horrifying sin, you are red hot by the conclusions of this study as a potential domestic terrorist. Now keep that in mind. Our Army, the Academy of the U.S. Army, West Point, has commissioned and published a study that classifies Americans by their affiliations and associations regarding their propensity to commit domestic terrorism. That study hits the light of day on the internet this week. And then we have reports about our Attorney General, Eric Holder, who spoke before the School of Law at Northwestern University. His topic of discussion, or one of his topics of discussion, was a 2010 incident where an American citizen who is a Muslim with a Muslim-sounding name, suspected of conspiring with terrorist groups in the Middle East, was killed by military operation by the authorization of the President of the United States. This guy might have been a bad man. He might have deserved to die. But he was an American citizen, and the President of the United States, without due process of law, without an arrest, an arraignment, a conviction, decided to have this man assassinated. Eric Holder at the University of Northwestern gave the rationale of the White House for that act. His distinction was that since the American citizen was not on American soil, he did not require the same due process as a normal American citizen, and the due process he was due was the judgment of the President and his advisors only. It's a pretty small leap to justify the killing of Americans suspected of terrorist activities while they're on American soil. So look at all these factors. It's through the looking glass stuff, my friends. We have a president who's won his second and final term of office by election. He has no elections left to win or lose. And with great rapidity, he has moved to put things in place which remove the ability of the American people to defend themselves against tyranny. He has commissioned and published a study that will help him and his minions identify which of us Americans are threats for domestic terrorism. He has established operationally and procedurally through his Attorney General and through our military under what circumstances he can decide to kill us even though we've never been convicted of a crime. He's got his allies in the legislature working on legislation to remove guns from our hands. And he's established a path by which, by executive order, he can do that whether they act or not. Add to all that an internet interview by a Dr. Garrow, a Nobel Peace Prize finalist, who's spent a life of helping children here in America and abroad. He has associations through his time in Washington on a board of a magazine that involves some very high-ranking military members. One retired general, by Dr. Garrow's account, sought him out to make this known to the public. There are people, forces within the Obama administration that are taking the temperature of high-ranking military officials, generals, to find out their likelihood, their propensity to give and carry out and oversee the carrying out of this order. If asked to confiscate arms from the American people, are you of a mind by which you would order your troops to fire upon American citizens who refuse to relinquish their weapons? Dr. Garrow was under terms of anonymity by this general. He gave assurances to the interviewer that this was a well-known, well-respected, lifetime servant in our military, and the information that he was relaying was credible. Now, I'm sure we'll find out how credible that information is. Of all the things I've mentioned in this video, that's the only one that can't be substantiated by a little research. I have a feeling when you consider it in context with the rest of what I'm telling you that it's probably true. So, Americans, understand we don't have much time. If we are patriots, if we are to be free men, we need to prepare ourselves, we need to arm ourselves, we need to inform ourselves, and the information we find needs to be spread throughout the countryside. Like-minded, patriotic, God-fearing Americans need to know what's going on and be prepared to stop it. I can't frame this argument in a gun debate or a public shooting debate or sporting and hunting arms debate. This is about the future of our country, and we are in imminent danger of losing our country. So, join the NRA, join Gun Owners of America, write your congressmen and your senators, let them know we are not about to have our country taken by a dictator or an oligarchy of progressives. This is America. It's ours. No one's taken it. That's all for tonight. More to come soon. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. See you later.